Rain hammered the marble windows of the Salviati estate as Serafina De Luca stood frozen at the end of a 20-foot dining table, shards of shattered porcelain glittering around her heels like broken ice. Across from her, Caius Moretti folded his newspaper with surgical precision and delivered 5 words that shattered 11 months of silent devotion. I never loved you, Serafina. No apology, no hesitation, just cold, clinical truth served with his morning espresso. For nearly a year, she had mistaken his cruelty for protection, his silence for grief, his distance for restraint. She believed coldness could soften into love if she waited long enough, endured quietly enough, loved fiercely enough. She was wrong. She wasn't his wife. She was leverage, a transaction sealed in blood and buried secrets. That same afternoon, an aging housekeeper slipped her a key to a hidden safe her father had concealed years before his death, a safe Caius and his entire empire knew nothing about. Inside waited a ledger powerful enough to topple governments, and one horrifying truth that made Serafina's blood run cold. Her father had orchestrated the assassination of Caius Moretti's father. If Caius ever discovered what she now held in her trembling hands, he would kill her without hesitation. So before sunset, Serafina removed her wedding ring, left behind 3 handwritten words, "You were right," and disappeared into the storm. If you want to know whether she survives the night, whether Caius finds her, and whether love can survive betrayal this deep, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The porcelain vase exploded against the wall 6 inches from Serafina's head. She didn't flinch. Couldn't. Fear had calcified somewhere deep in her chest over the past 11 months, hardening into something cold and immovable that made breathing difficult but screaming impossible. Caius didn't even look up from his newspaper. "You're wasting perfectly good Venetian glass," he said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. "Your father would be disappointed." Serafina's fingers curled against the mahogany table, nails biting into wood grain polished to a mirror shine. Outside, rain hammered the estate's black marble windows in sheets, turning the Tuscan countryside into a watercolor blur of gray and green. The storm had been building for hours. So had the silence between them. "Don't talk about my father," she managed, her voice smaller than she wanted, thinner than she needed. Caius finally lifted his gaze. Dark eyes. Empty eyes. The kind of eyes that had watched men die and forgotten their names by morning. "Why not?" He set down his espresso cup with deliberate care. "He's the reason you're here, isn't he? The reason I married you. The reason you're standing in my dining room wearing his mother's pearls like some kind of memorial." The pearls felt like a noose. Serafina had worn them every day since the wedding, a small rebellion disguised as tradition. Her grandmother's pearls, passed down through 3 generations of De Luca women who understood that survival required more than beauty. It required patience, endurance, the ability to smile while your heart turned to stone. "I wore them because I thought—" She stopped herself, swallowed the rest of the sentence like broken glass. "You thought what?" Caius leaned back in his chair, studying her with the clinical detachment of a surgeon examining a tumor. "That I'd notice? That I'd care? That playing the devoted wife would somehow earn you something other than contempt?" The words landed like bullets. Serafina had spent 11 months constructing elaborate explanations for his cruelty. He was grieving. He was overwhelmed by the weight of the empire. He was protecting her from the darkness of his world by keeping her at arm's length. She had built entire mythologies around his silence, transforming neglect into noble sacrifice. All lies. "I thought," she said quietly, "that eventually you'd see me as something other than an obligation." Caius laughed. Actually laughed. The sound echoed through the cavernous dining room, bouncing off frescoed ceilings that depicted angels and demons locked in eternal battle. The irony wasn't lost on her. An obligation. He tasted the word like wine. "That's generous. You were a transaction, Serafina. A very expensive, very necessary transaction that secured peace between our families after your father's unfortunate passing." Unfortunate. Her father had been found with a bullet in his skull and his ledgers missing. The official story was suicide. Everyone knew better. Nobody said anything. That's how power worked in their world. Truth was negotiable. Silence was currency, and blood bought loyalty that lasted exactly as long as the checks cleared. "You married me 2 weeks after he died," Serafina whispered. 2 weeks. Timing is everything in business. Caius stood, adjusting his cufflinks with practiced ease. Custom Italian silk. Platinum. Engraved with the Moretti family crest, a serpent devouring its own tail. Your father understood that. He built an empire on precise timing and ruthless efficiency. Shame he didn't apply the same principles to his personal security. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Serafina's hands trembled. "You didn't kill him?" Caius moved around the table with the fluid grace of a predator circling wounded prey. "No, though I considered it. Your father had a talent for making powerful enemies. One of them finally got creative. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. Close enough that she could see the tiny scar above his left eyebrow, the only visible evidence that Caius Moretti had ever been vulnerable, ever been anything other than perfectly controlled. "But I did marry you," he continued softly. "I married you because your father's death left a power vacuum that would have ignited a war across 3 countries if someone didn't move quickly. I married you because every rival family was circling like sharks, waiting to carve up the DeLuca territories. I married you because it was strategically sound, politically necessary, and financially advantageous. Each word was a scalpel. I married you," Caius finished, "because your father was useful. You are considerably less so." Something inside Serafina died quietly. Not her love for him, that had been dying slowly for months, withering like cut flowers in a forgotten vase. Not her hope, that had suffocated somewhere around the 4th month of sleeping alone in a bed built for 2. Her fear died. The terror that had kept her small, kept her quiet, kept her performing the role of dutiful wife while slowly disappearing into the estate's marble halls like a ghost. It evaporated. What rushed in to fill the vacuum was something colder, clearer, infinitely more dangerous. "Look at me," she said. Caius raised an eyebrow. "I am looking at you." "No, actually look at me, not through me, not past me, at me." For a moment something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. Then it vanished, replaced by that familiar mask of elegant indifference. He looked, really looked. "Now say it again," Serafina ordered, her voice steady for the first time in 11 months. "Tell me you never loved me. Tell me I was just a transaction. Tell me I meant nothing, but this time do it while actually seeing me." The silence stretched between them like wire pulled taut. Rain continued its assault on the windows. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed noon. The sound felt like a countdown. Caius held her gaze, those dark, empty eyes that had watched empires crumble and men break. "I never loved you," he said clearly. "You were a transaction, a means to an end, a strategic acquisition that secured peace and consolidated power. You mean nothing to me beyond what your name provided." He didn't blink, didn't hesitate, didn't lie. "Thank you," Serafina said quietly. "I needed to hear that." She turned and walked toward the dining room doors, her heels clicking against marble with each measured step. Behind her, she heard Caius pour another espresso, unruffled, unmoved, already dismissing her from his thoughts like a minor inconvenience. She made it to the hallway before her knees buckled. The housekeeper found her 20 minutes later, sitting on the floor of the west corridor with her back against Louis XIV wallpaper that probably cost more than a car. Maria Battaglia was 73 years old and had worked for the DeLuca family since before Serafina was born. She had witnessed 3 generations of brutality disguised as legacy, had cleaned blood from marble floors and buried secrets in locked drawers. She was also the only person in the entire estate who looked at Serafina with something resembling sympathy. "Signora," Maria's voice was gentle, "you should not be on the floor." "Why not?" Serafina stared at nothing. "It's honest, at least. No pretense. Just cold stone and the truth." Maria lowered herself down with a soft grunt, joints protesting, and sat beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. The house settled around them, ancient wood creaking, pipes groaning, the weight of centuries pressing down on foundations built to last forever. Your father, Maria said finally, used to sit in this exact spot when he was troubled. Serafina turned her head. My father was never troubled. He was a monster wearing expensive suits. Monsters are made, child, not born. Maria reached into her apron pocket and withdrew something small and brass. A key. Old-fashioned, ornate, the kind that opened locks built before digital security and fingerprint scanners. Your father was many terrible things, but he loved you. In his own broken way, he loved you. Don't. Serafina's voice cracked. Don't romanticize him. He sold me to Chaos Moretti like livestock. He tried to protect you. Maria pressed the key into Serafina's palm, closing her fingers around it. Before he died, he told me that if anything happened to him, I was to give you this. Only you. Not Moretti. Not his men. You. The brass was warm from Maria's pocket, worn smooth by decades of use. What is it open? The hunting room. 3rd floor. Behind the painting of the boar hunt, the one your grandfather commissioned in 1947, there's a safe hidden in the wall. Your father kept things there, important things, things he never wanted Moretti to find. Serafina's heart hammered against her ribs. Why are you telling me this now? Maria's weathered face was unreadable. Because I saw your eyes when you walked out of that dining room. I've seen that look before. On your mother's face, 3 months before she died. On your grandmother's face the night she disappeared. On women who've reached the end of what they can endure. I'm not disappearing. No? Maria stood slowly, knees popping. You're deciding whether to fight or surrender. The key gives you options. What you do with options is your choice. But I've worked in this house for 52 years, child. I've learned that secrets are the only currency that matters when you have no power of your own. She walked away without another word, leaving Serafina alone in the hallway, with a brass key burning a hole in her palm and questions multiplying like cancer cells. The hunting room was exactly where Maria said it would be. 3rd floor, east wing, a forgotten space filled with mounted animal heads and weapons that hadn't been fired in decades. The boar hunt painting dominated one wall, a Baroque massacre frozen in oils and gold leaf, all blood and tusks and aristocratic violence. Serafina's hands shook as she swung the heavy frame aside. The safe was small, unremarkable, the kind of thing you'd pass without noticing if you didn't know to look. The key slid in smoothly, tumblers clicking like bones breaking. Inside, a leather-bound ledger. Nothing else. She pulled it out carefully, half expecting it to explode. The leather was soft with age, the pages yellowed but intact. Her father's handwriting covered every line in meticulous detail. Dates, names, amounts, transactions that spanned decades. Serafina sank into a dusty armchair and started reading. 2 hours later, she understood why her father had hidden it. The ledger wasn't just a record of criminal activity. It was a map of corruption so vast, so intricate, that it touched governments across 3 continents. Politicians, judges, cardinals, military officers, corporate executives. All of them bought, blackmailed, or broken. All of them documented with forensic precision. Her father had been meticulous. Every payment was logged, every favor recorded, every piece of leverage cataloged like inventory in a warehouse. This wasn't just evidence. It was a nuclear bomb waiting for someone to push the button. But it was the final section that made Serafina's blood turn to ice. A list of assassinations. 23 names. 23 people her father had ordered killed over 30 years. And there, third from the bottom, dated 6 years earlier. Giovanni Moretti. Payment, 2 million euros. Contractor, external. Method, car accident. Completion, confirmed. Giovanni Moretti, Caius's father. The man whose death had triggered the brutal consolidation of power that eventually led to Caius becoming the youngest and most feared crime lord in northern Italy. Serafina read the entry 3 times, hoping she'd misunderstood, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. They didn't. Her father had killed Caius's father, and Caius had married her without knowing. The ledger slipped from her fingers, hitting the floor with a soft thud that sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. She sat frozen, mind racing through implications that multiplied like a virus. If Caius ever discovered this, he would kill her. Slowly. Painfully. publicly. He would make an example of her that would be whispered about for generations. But there was more. Serafina flipped back through the pages with trembling hands, searching for something that had caught her eye earlier. A notation that hadn't made sense the first time. There. 18 months before the ledger's final entry, a payment that made her stomach twist. Elena De Luca. Payment, 500,000 euros. Contractor. Internal medical. Method. Accelerated illness. Completion. Confirmed. Elena De Luca. Her mother, who had died of cancer when Serafina was 16. Her mother, whose illness had been sudden and aggressive and mercifully quick. Her mother, who she'd sat beside during those final horrible weeks, holding her hand while poison pumped through her veins disguised as a medicine. Her father hadn't just killed enemies, he'd murdered his own wife. Serafina ran to the corner of the room and vomited until her stomach was empty and her throat burned and tears streamed down her face in a flood she couldn't control. Outside, the storm intensified. Thunder rolled across the Tuscan hills like artillery fire. She knelt on the floor of the hunting room for what felt like hours, surrounded by dead things and darker truths, trying to reconcile the father she'd loved with the monster documented in leather and ink. Eventually, her tears stopped. Eventually, her hands stopped shaking. Eventually, something crystallized inside her chest, something harder than diamond and sharper than broken glass. Purpose. Serafina stood, wiped her face, and collected the ledger with steady hands. She knew exactly 3 things with absolute certainty. 1, she could never let Caius find this. If he discovered her father had killed his, she wouldn't survive the night. 2, she could never stay in this house, this marriage, this life built on corpses and lies. 3, she had a choice to make. Destroy the ledger and live as Caius Moretti's useless wife until he tired of her and discarded her like garbage. Or run. Take the ledger. Disappear. Become something other than a transaction. She chose survival. The decision took less than a heartbeat. Serafina moved through the estate like a ghost, collecting only what she could carry. Passport, cash, a few photographs of her mother from before the sickness. The pearls. She left behind designer clothes and jewelry and every expensive thing Caius had provided, gifts that were really just receipts for a purchase made with her father's blood. In the bedroom she'd slept in alone for 11 months, she found her wedding ring still on the nightstand where she'd left it that morning. The diamond caught the dim light, throwing tiny rainbows across white silk sheets that had never been rumpled by anything more passionate than restless sleep. She picked up the ring and held it for a long moment, feeling its weight, its cold perfection, its terrible symbolism. Then she set it down with 3 handwritten words on embossed stationery. You were right. By the time the sun set over the Tuscan hills, Serafina De Luca, wife of Caius Moretti, daughter of a monster, keeper of secrets that could ignite wars, was gone. She walked out of the estate through the service entrance with a backpack and the ledger, and nothing resembling a plan beyond survive and don't stop moving. The rain soaked through her coat within minutes. She didn't care. Each step away from the marble prison felt like resurrection. Cold. Painful. Absolutely necessary. A mile down the road, headlights cut through the darkness. Serafina froze, certain it was Caius's men already, certain her escape had lasted less than an hour before discovery. Her hand moved to the knife in her pocket, a small blade she'd taken from the kitchen, useless against trained killers but better than nothing. The vehicle slowed. An old taxi, dented and rusted, looking like it had survived decades through sheer stubborn refusal to die. The driver rolled down his window. Senora, you need help? He was maybe 60, with a weathered face and tired eyes that had seen too much and stopped judging long ago. Serafina made a decision in the space between heartbeats. How far will 5,000 euros take me? The driver's eyes widened. 5,000 euros was probably 6 months of income. Maybe more. Depends where you're going. Away. Her voice was steady, final. Just away. As far and as fast as possible. And you never saw me. You never picked me up. You never heard my name. The driver studied her for a long moment, taking in her soaked designer coat, her desperate eyes, the way she kept looking over her shoulder like prey expecting pursuit. He'd seen this before. Women running, women fleeing, women who'd finally hit their breaking point. Get in, he said quietly. I know people. people who can help. Serafina climbed into the back seat, holding the ledger against her chest like a child clutching a stuffed animal. The taxi smelled like cigarettes and old leather and the particular desperation of working-class survival. As they pulled away from the estate, she looked back one final time. The lights of the Salviati house blazed against the storm, a fortress of marble and lies and beautiful, terrible things. Somewhere inside, Caius Moretti was probably pouring another espresso, completely unaware that his calculated, controlled world was about to detonate. Somewhere inside, Maria Battaglia was burning the empty safes combination in the kitchen fireplace. Somewhere inside, history was preparing to repeat itself with women disappearing and men refusing to learn. But Serafina wasn't history. Not anymore. The taxi merged onto the highway heading north, rain hammering the windshield, darkness swallowing the road ahead. She pressed her forehead against the cold window and whispered words that felt like prayer and promise combined. I survived you, Papa. I survived him. I'm going to survive this too. Behind her, the estate lights grew smaller. Ahead, everything was uncertain. But for the first time in 11 months, for the first time since she'd signed her life away in a ceremony performed 2 weeks after her father's murder, Serafina De Luca felt something dangerous unfurl in her chest. Hope. And underneath it, sharper and harder and infinitely more lethal, the cold, patient fury of a woman who'd finally stopped asking permission to save herself. The taxi driver's name was Renato Valli, and he hadn't asked a single question in 47 minutes of driving through rain-slicked highways that cut north through darkness. Serafina watched his eyes in the rearview mirror, careful eyes, the kind that had learned when to look and when to pretend blindness was survival. There's a truck stop ahead, Renato said finally, his voice rough from decades of cigarettes. We stop there. Someone will meet us. Who? Someone who helps women disappear. He lit a cigarette, cracking the window despite the rain. You're not the first person I've driven away from that estate. You won't be the last. The words settled in Serafina's chest like stones. She wanted to ask who else had run, wanted to know if they'd survived, wanted to know if she was following footsteps or walking off a cliff. But fear kept her silent, fear that knowing would make her turn back, would convince her that escape was impossible, would break whatever fragile courage had gotten her this far. The truck stop materialized out of the storm like something conjured. Fluorescent lights fought against the darkness, illuminating rows of 18-wheelers parked like sleeping giants. A diner squatted at the edge of the lot, its neon sign flickering the word Aperto in sick red light. Renato pulled around back, away from the main lights, and killed the engine. Wait here! He disappeared into the rain before Serafina could respond. She sat alone in the back seat, clutching the ledger, listening to water hammer the taxi's roof and her heart hammer her ribs. Every pair of headlights that swept past felt like a threat. Every sound felt like discovery. Minutes crawled by. Then the passenger door opened and a woman slid into the front seat. She was maybe 50, with iron gray hair pulled back severe, and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as her expression. She wore a mechanic's coverall and carried the kind of calm that only comes from surviving things that would break most people. Let me see your hands, the woman said without preamble. Serafina held them up, trembling, soft, manicured, the hands of someone who'd never worked a day in their life. The woman snorted. You're De Luca's daughter, the one who married Moretti. It wasn't a question. Not anymore. Serafina's voice was steadier than she felt. I left. Left or ran? Does it matter? It does if Moretti's men are 5 minutes behind you looking to drag you back. The woman turned in her seat, studying Serafina with the clinical assessment of someone evaluating merchandise. Renato says you paid him 5,000 euros to drive you away from the estate. That's either desperation or stupidity. Which is it? Survival. The woman's expression didn't change. You carrying anything illegal? Serafina's grip tightened on the ledger. Information. Dangerous information. About Moretti? About everyone. Something flickered in the woman's eyes. Interest, maybe, or calculation. My name is Giulia Nero. I run a network that helps women escape situations they can't survive. Abusive husbands, organized crime, trafficking. We've moved maybe 200 women in the past decade. Some make it, some don't. but everyone who comes to me follows the same rules. What rules? Rule 1. Complete silence. You don't contact anyone from your old life, not friends, not family, not the mailman. You're dead to everyone you knew. Rule 2. Absolute obedience. When I tell you to move, you move. When I tell you to hide, you hide. When I tell you to trust someone, you trust them. Your survival depends on following instructions without hesitation. Rule 3. No heroics. You're not going back to settle scores or retrieve sentimental items or say goodbye. You're not a character in a movie. You're prey. Act like it. Serafina swallowed hard. And if I break the rules? Then you're on your own. Julia's voice was flat. Final. And women on their own against the Moretti Empire usually end up in unmarked graves or the bottom of lakes. Your choice. The rain intensified, drumming against the taxi like bullets. Serafina thought about the estate, about Caius discovering her wedding ring and the 3-word note, about his men flooding the countryside searching for her, about what would happen if they found her before she could disappear completely. I'll follow your rules, she said quietly. Julia nodded once. Smart. Renato, get her bag. The next 4 hours were a blur of motion and transfers that felt orchestrated by someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Julia drove her to a farmhouse 15 miles outside Siena, where a pig farmer named Carlo handed her a change of clothes, rough cotton, work boots, nothing that looked expensive or memorable, and burned her designer coat in a barrel behind the barn. You stand out, he said, watching the flames consume Italian leather that cost more than his truck. Everything about you screams money and privilege. That's a target. Blend in or die. From there, a refrigerated cheese truck driven by a woman who introduced herself only as Marta and refused to make eye contact. Serafina rode hidden behind crates of pecorino for 90 minutes, shivering in the cold, trying not to vomit from the smell and the terror. Then a safe house in Arezzo run by an elderly couple who fed her soup and asked no questions and looked at her with the weary sympathy of people who'd seen this tragedy repeat itself across generations. Then another car, another driver, another fragment of the invisible network that existed beneath the surface of normal society, helping the desperate and the hunted stay one step ahead of the predators. By dawn, Serafina found herself in a cottage near Lake Lugano, just across the Swiss border. The woman who owned it was named Beatrice Vescari, and she was the first person in 12 hours who actually smiled. You look like your mother, Beatrice said softly, ushering Serafina inside. Elena had the same eyes, intelligent, sad, old before their time. Serafina froze in the doorway. You knew my mother? We grew up together. Before she married your father, before she became Elena De Luca, and I became someone smart enough to run. Beatrice closed the door, locked it, checked the windows with practiced efficiency. She used to write me letters, secret letters, told me about her life, about you, about how much she loved you, and how terrified she was that you'd end up trapped the same way she was. The grief hit like a fist. Serafina sank into a chair, exhaustion and emotion finally overwhelming the adrenaline that had kept her moving through the night. He killed her, my father. I found evidence. He paid someone to make it look like cancer. Beatrice went very still. You're certain? It's in his ledger, documented, dated, a transaction just like all the others. And you have this ledger? Serafina pulled it from her bag, setting it on the table between them like evidence at a trial. Everything's in here. 30 years of crimes, assassinations, blackmail, payments, including proof that my father ordered the death of Caius Moretti's father 6 years ago. Beatrice sat down slowly, staring at the leather-bound book like it was a live grenade. Does Moretti know? No. Nobody knows except me. And now you. Then you're carrying a death sentence. Beatrice's voice was matter-of-fact. If the Moretti family discovers what's in there, they'll kill you. If rival families find out you have leverage like this, they'll kidnap you and torture you until you give it up. If the authorities get hold of it, you'll be a witness who mysteriously disappears before trial. That ledger makes you the most dangerous person in Italy. I know. Do you? Beatrice leaned forward, her expression hard. Because running away from an arranged marriage is one thing. Running away with evidence that could topple governments and ignite gang wars is something else entirely. You're not just escaping an unhappy situation, Serafina. You've made yourself a target for every powerful person documented in those pages. The words settled over the room like a burial shroud. Serafina's hands trembled. She pressed them flat against the table, willing them to stop, willing herself to be stronger than the fear threatening to drown her. "What would you do?" she whispered. "If you were me?" Beatrice was quiet for a long moment, studying her with eyes that had seen too much and survived anyway. "I'd burn it," she said finally. "I'd destroy every page and disappear, start over somewhere far away with a new name and a new life and never look back." But your mother couldn't burn her prison either, and it killed her." Beatrice stood, moving to the window. Outside, Lake Lugano stretched silver and still in the early morning light. "The question isn't what I do. It's what you can live with. Can you live knowing your father murdered your mother and 22 other people and his secrets died with him? Can you live knowing Moretti built his empire on your father's crimes and never faces consequences? Can you live carrying this weight silently for the rest of your life?" Serafina stared at the ledger. She thought about her mother wasting away in a hospital bed, convinced she was dying of natural causes while poison pumped through her veins. She thought about Caius's father, Giovanni Moretti, dying in a car accident that was really an execution. She thought about all the unnamed victims documented in meticulous handwriting, their lives reduced to transaction records. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't know what I can live with anymore." "Then you need to figure it out quickly." Beatrice turned from the window. "Because Moretti will be looking for you, and men like him don't stop until they find what they're hunting." She was right. By noon, Serafina's disappearance had detonated across the Italian underworld like a bomb. Caius Moretti returned to the estate at 11 in the morning after a meeting with his financial advisors. He'd spent the morning reviewing quarterly reports and authorizing payments and discussing expansion into Eastern European markets. Business. Numbers. The clean, logical machinery of empire. He walked into the bedroom expecting to find Serafina exactly where he'd left her, invisible, silent, irrelevant. Instead, he found her wedding ring on the nightstand, and 3 words in her elegant handwriting. "You were right." For 30 seconds, Caius stood frozen, staring at the note like it was written in a language he didn't understand. Then he moved. "Find her!" His security chief, a granite-faced man named Luca who'd served the Moretti family for 20 years, appeared within 60 seconds. "Sir, my wife is gone. Her ring is here. Her clothes are here. She's not." Caius's voice was surgical, controlled, the kind of calm that preceded violence. "I want every security camera reviewed, every staff member questioned, every vehicle checked. I want to know when she left, how she left, and where she went." "Right away, sir." Luca disappeared, already barking orders into his phone. Caius picked up the wedding ring, feeling its weight, reading those 3 devastating words again and again. "You were right." Right about what? That he'd never loved her? That she was just a transaction? That their marriage was business and nothing more? Something twisted in his chest, something uncomfortable and unfamiliar that he immediately suppressed because Caius Moretti didn't do discomfort, didn't do uncertainty, didn't do emotion that couldn't be weaponized or controlled. He set the ring down with deliberate care and walked to her closet. Her clothes hung in perfect rows. Dresses, coats, shoes organized by color, everything expensive, everything untouched, everything exactly as it had been that morning, except her passport was gone. The emergency cash he knew she kept hidden in a jewelry box, gone. And in the back corner, behind silk gowns she'd never worn, he found a cardboard box he'd never seen before. Inside, letters, dozens of them, all addressed to him, all unsent. Caius's hands moved without permission, pulling out the first envelope. The handwriting was Serafina's, careful and elegant and heartbreakingly earnest. He opened it. "Dear Caius, I know you don't read letters. I know you probably never will. But I'm writing this anyway because I don't know what else to do with everything I'm feeling. We've been married for 2 weeks and you haven't said more than 20 words to me. I keep wondering if I did something wrong, if I'm not what you expected. If the version of me you agreed to marry exists only in your head and the real me is just a disappointment. My father used to say that silence is a weapon. I'm starting to understand what he meant. I want to know you. I I want to understand why you look at me like I'm a problem you're trying to solve instead of a person you chose to marry. I want to believe this gets easier. Does it get easier? Caius read it twice, then reached for another letter. Dear Caius, it's been 3 months. You came to bed at 2 a.m. last night and left before dawn. I woke up alone again. I always wake up alone. Sometimes I imagine what it would be like if you actually touched me. Not sexually, just touched me. Held my hand, brushed hair from my face, anything that would make me feel like I exist to you as something other than furniture. I tried to talk to you at breakfast this morning, and you looked right through me like I was made of glass. I'm starting to think I am. S. Another letter. Dear Caius, 6 months today. I bought you a gift, a first edition of that book you mentioned once about Roman military strategy. Stupid, probably. You have everything. You need nothing, especially not gifts from me. I left it on your desk anyway. You haven't mentioned it. I don't think you even noticed. S. Caius's chest felt tight. Wrong. Like something inside him was cracking. He rifled through the box with increasing urgency, reading fragments of hope and loneliness and patience that slowly eroded into exhaustion. The final letter was dated 3 days ago. Dear Caius, I think I have to stop waiting for you to love me. I've spent 11 months constructing elaborate explanations for why you keep me at a distance. You're protecting me. You're grieving your father. You're overwhelmed by responsibility. You're afraid of vulnerability. But the truth is simpler and crueler. You just don't care. I wish you did. I wish you were capable of seeing me as something other than a strategic acquisition. I wish I could hate you. That would be easier than this pathetic hope that keeps flickering no matter how many times you extinguish it. I don't know who I'm writing these letters for anymore. Maybe just for proof that I existed, that I tried, that I loved you even when you made it impossible. I'm so tired, Caius. I'm so tired of being invisible. Serafina. The letter slipped from his fingers. Caius Moretti, who had ordered executions without flinching, who had watched empires crumble without emotion, who had built his entire identity on control and calculation, sank to the floor of his missing wife's closet, surrounded by unsent letters, and realized something devastating. He had loved her. Somewhere between the quiet mornings and sleepless nights, between her patient silences and careful smiles, between all the moments he'd deliberately ignored her, he had fallen in love with Serafina De Luca. And he'd been too fucking damaged to recognize it until she was gone. Sir, Luca's voice cut through the realization like a blade. Caius looked up, his face carefully blank, every trace of emotion buried beneath the mask he'd worn for so long it had fused to his skin. What did you find? She left through the service entrance at 6:47 p.m. yesterday. Alone, carrying only a backpack. We have her on camera walking down the service road. Luca paused. Sir, there's something else. What? Your father-in-law's study, the hunting room on the 3rd floor. There's a hidden safe behind the boar hunt painting. Caius stood slowly. I know about that safe. It's been empty for years. It was opened yesterday afternoon. Someone used a key. The lock shows fresh scratches. Ice flooded Caius's veins. Who else knew about that safe? According to the staff, only De Luca himself, and possibly the housekeeper, Maria Battaglia. She's worked here since before you acquired the property. Bring her to me. Now. 10 minutes later, Maria Battaglia stood in Caius's study with the calm dignity of someone who'd already made peace with whatever came next. The safe, Caius said quietly. What was in it? I don't know, sir. Don't lie to me, Maria. You gave her the key, didn't you? The old woman's expression didn't change. Signor De Luca instructed me to give his daughter the key if anything happened to him. I followed his instructions. What was in the safe? I don't know. I was never told. I only knew it existed and that Serafina was to have access after her father's death. Caius moved around the desk with predatory grace. My wife disappeared less than 24 hours ago carrying something from that safe. Something important enough to make her run. Something dangerous enough to make her vanish without a trace. So I'll ask you one more time, and I suggest you answer carefully. What was in the safe? Maria met his eyes without flinching. Even if I knew, sir, I wouldn't tell you. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. Your wife understood that. Perhaps you should too. The old woman's courage was remarkable, also useless. Caius nodded once. You're fired. You have 2 hours to collect your belongings and leave the property. If you're still here after that, my men will remove you by force. Understood, sir. Maria turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Signor Moretti, she loved you. I watched her love you for 11 months while you slowly killed that love through neglect. Whatever she took from that safe, whatever made her run, you drove her to it. She left before Caius could respond. He stood alone in his study, surrounded by the machinery of empire, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Fear. Not fear of enemies or consequences or failure. Fear that he'd lost something irreplaceable. Fear that he'd destroyed the only genuine thing in his carefully constructed life. Fear that Serafina was gone forever, and it was entirely his fault. Find her, he said into the silence. I don't care what it costs. I don't care how many men it takes. Find her and bring her back. But Serafina was already 3 countries away, sitting in a cottage by a Swiss lake, reading her father's ledger and realizing that running from Caius Moretti was only the first problem. The second problem was much worse. Beatrice had left to buy supplies, promising to return before dark. Serafina used the solitude to read the ledger cover to cover, documenting every name, every crime, every secret that could be used as leverage. The assassinations, the blackmail, the corrupted officials, the money laundering networks, the human trafficking operations disguised as legitimate shipping companies. 30 years of evil documented with accountant-level precision. She was halfway through the financial section when she found the entry that made her blood run cold. A payment dated 2 months ago. Recent, current, active. Project Silencer. Payment, 5 million euros. Contractor, Bellini Group. Target, Elena, De Luca. Documentation, status, ongoing. Serafina read it 3 times, trying to make sense of words that shouldn't exist. Her mother had been dead for years. Why was there an active operation with her mother's name attached? What documentation were they trying to silence? She flipped forward, searching for context. Found it 6 pages later. A ledger entry from 16 years ago. A payment to a doctor named Silvio Renzetti for comprehensive medical documentation and testimony preparation. The amount? 200,000 euros. Next to it, a notation in her father's handwriting, insurance against future complications. Serafina's hands shook as understanding crystallized. Her father hadn't just killed her mother. He'd kept evidence, proof, documentation that could be used if anyone ever questioned the circumstances of Elena De Luca's death. And 2 months ago, 3 months before Serafina's wedding to Caius Moretti, someone had paid 5 million euros to find and destroy that evidence. Who? She flipped back through pages frantically, searching for names, searching for connections, searching for anything that would explain why someone would care about her mother's death after all these years. Then she found it. A single line buried in the middle of a financial transfer log. Moretti consolidation payment received. Access to De Luca medical records transferred as agreed. The entry was dated 1 week before her wedding. Caius had known. He'd known her father killed her mother. He'd known and married her anyway, used her anyway, destroyed her anyway. Serafina ran to the bathroom and vomited until her stomach was empty and her throat burned and tears mixed with bile in a mess she couldn't separate. When Beatrice returned 2 hours later with groceries and clean clothes, she found Serafina sitting on the floor with her back against the bathtub, staring at nothing. What happened? He knew. Serafina's voice was hollow. Caius knew my father killed my mother. He's been systematically destroying evidence for months. He married me knowing exactly what my father did. He used me to consolidate power while cleaning up the very crimes that gave him justification to take over in the first place. Beatrice set down the groceries slowly. You're certain? It's documented, dated, paid for. Serafina looked up, her face streaked with tears and something harder. I didn't just run from a loveless marriage. I ran from someone who's been playing a game I didn't even know I was part of. Then you can't go back. Ever. You understand that, yes? If Moretti knows what's in that ledger, if he's been actively destroying evidence, he'll kill me. Serafina finished the sentence. Not because I ran. Because I know too much. Because I'm a liability he can't afford. The cottage suddenly felt very small, very isolated, very far from anything resembling safety. Beatrice pulled out her phone. I'm calling my brother, Lucien. He has connections, resources. He can get you somewhere Moretti's network can't reach. Where? South America, Southeast Asia, somewhere far enough away that you become more trouble to find than you're worth. But before Beatrice could dial, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. She read it, went pale. What? Serafina stood. What is it? Moretti's men are already searching. They're flooding train stations, airports, border crossings. They're offering a reward, €500,000 for information leading to your location. Beatrice showed her the phone. A grainy photo of Serafina filled the screen, pulled from security footage. Beneath it, missing, reward for safe return. Safe return. The words were a lie wrapped in civilized language. How long do we have? Serafina's voice was steady, despite the terror flooding her system. Hours. Maybe less. This cottage is registered under my name. If Moretti's people are thorough, and they will be, they'll connect me to your mother. Once they do that, this is the first place they'll look. Then I have to leave. Now. Agreed, but we need a plan. Running blind gets you caught. Beatrice was already moving, pulling out maps, making calls, her hands steady with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Lucien can meet you in Como. From there, we route you through Austria, then Germany, then out of Europe entirely. Serafina's mind raced. The ledger. I can't carry it. If I'm caught with it, then we copy it. Photograph every page. Upload it to encrypted cloud storage. Create redundancy. That way the original can be hidden while you have access to the information. They worked in frantic silence. Serafina photographing pages while Beatrice made arrangements, both women moving with the desperate efficiency of people racing against a clock they couldn't see but could hear ticking down. By the time they finished, dusk was bleeding across Lake Lugano. Beatrice handed her a new phone. This is clean, untraceable. Lucien's number is programmed in. Don't call anyone else. Don't access social media. Don't do anything that creates a digital footprint. Serafina took the phone with hands that had stopped trembling and started turning cold. Thank you for everything, for helping me when you didn't have to. Your mother was my best friend. I watched her disappear into that marriage and couldn't save her. Beatrice's voice cracked slightly. I won't make that mistake twice. They embraced briefly, two women connected by tragedy and the determination to survive it. Then Serafina picked up her bag, left the ledger hidden in a locked drawer, and walked out into the gathering darkness. A car waited at the end of the drive. A man she didn't know behind the wheel. She climbed in without hesitation because hesitation meant capture and capture meant death. As they pulled away, she looked back one final time at the cottage where she'd learned the full scope of her father's crimes and Caius's betrayal. The lights were already off. Beatrice was erasing evidence of her presence. Within an hour, it would be like Serafina De Luca had never been there at all. The car merged onto the highway heading toward Como, toward Austria, toward a future that was nothing but question marks and dangerous maybes. In the back seat, Serafina pulled out the clean phone and stared at Lucien's number. One call away from help. One call away from the next link in a chain that might save her, or might lead Caius's hunters straight to her location. Trust or die. Those were the options. She pressed dial. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a man's voice, cultured and cautious. Yes? Beatrice sent me. She said you could help. A pause. You're Elena's daughter. I was. Now I'm no one. I need to disappear. Disappearing costs money. I have money. I need more than money. I need to know what I'm protecting you from, because if Caius Moretti is involved, he is. Another pause, longer this time. Then you're not just running from a husband. You're running from an empire. That changes the equation considerably. Serafina closed her eyes. I'm carrying information. Dangerous information about my father, about Caius, about crimes that go back decades. If I'm caught, stop talking. Lucien's voice was sharp. Not on the phone. Not anywhere digital. We meet in Como, tomorrow morning. There's a hotel, the Vittoria. Check in under the name Anna Marini. I'll find you. How will I know it's you? You won't. That's the point. Trust your mother's judgment. She trusted me. You'll have to do the same. The line went dead. Serafina sat in the back seat watching the Italian countryside blur past, heading toward a meeting with a stranger who might save her or sell her back to Caius, carrying secrets that could destroy governments, and finally understanding what her mother must have felt, trapped between monsters. Choosing the lesser evil, hoping desperately that lesser actually meant survivable. The driver didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just drove through the night like he'd done this 1,000 times before. Maybe he had. Maybe there was an entire invisible world of women running and men hunting, and the few brave souls who built escape routes between predator and prey. Maybe her mother had known about this world. Maybe she'd tried to run once too. Maybe she'd failed. Serafina pressed her forehead against the cold window and whispered words that felt like promise and prayer combined. I won't fail. I won't go back. I won't die like you did, Mama. Behind her, somewhere in the darkness, Caius Moretti was tearing apart his empire, searching for her. Ahead, somewhere in the unknown, a man named Lucien held answers she desperately needed. And in her pocket, a phone full of photographed secrets that made her the most dangerous woman in Europe. The point of no return wasn't when she left the estate. It was now. This moment. This choice to keep running toward uncertainty instead of surrendering to the devil she knew. The car sped through the night, carrying Serafina De Luca toward Como, toward Lucien Vescari, toward a future that would demand she become someone stronger, colder, and infinitely more ruthless than the frightened girl who'd married a monster 11 months ago. She was done being prey. Starting tomorrow, she would learn to hunt. The Hotel Vittoria sat 3 blocks from Lake Como's waterfront, wedged between a gelateria and a pharmacy that had been there since before the Second World War. It was the kind of place tourists walked past without noticing, clean but unremarkable, expensive enough to be respectable but cheap enough to avoid attracting attention. Serafina checked in at 7 in the morning under the name Anna Marini, paying cash, avoiding eye contact with the desk clerk who looked too tired to care about anything beyond his next cigarette break. Room 302, 3rd floor, window facing the street. She locked the door, checked the bathroom, looked under the bed with the paranoia of someone who'd learned that safety was an illusion maintained only through constant vigilance. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and waited. The phone Beatrice gave her sat silent on the nightstand. Minutes crawled past like wounded animals. By 9 o'clock, Serafina had memorized every crack in the ceiling, every stain on the carpet, every sound filtering through the walls, voices in the hallway, water running in adjacent rooms, the city waking up outside her window, oblivious to the fact that she was hiding inside its ordinary machinery. The knock came at 9:47. 3 sharp raps. Deliberate. Controlled. Serafina stood, her hand moving instinctively to the knife she'd taken from Beatrice's kitchen, a small paring blade that would be useless against a trained killer but made her feel slightly less defenseless. Who is it? Lucien Vescari. Beatrice sent you to me. The voice was cultured, older, carrying the kind of authority that came from decades of being obeyed without question. Serafina opened the door. The man standing in the hallway was maybe 60, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than the entire hotel. He looked like he belonged in boardrooms and private clubs, not cheap hotels where fugitives hid from their pasts. He stepped inside without waiting for invitation, closed the door, locked it, and studied her with the same clinical assessment Julia Nero had used 2 days earlier. You look like Elena, he said finally. Same eyes, same expression of someone trying very hard not to fall apart. You knew my mother well? Well enough to know she would hate what you've become. Lucien moved to the window, checked the street below with practiced efficiency, then closed the curtains. Well enough to know she'd also understand why you had no choice. Serafina's grip tightened on the knife she was holding behind her back. Beatrice said you could help me disappear. I can, for a price. Money? Information. Lucien and turned from the window. You're running from Caius Moretti. That much is obvious. But you're also carrying something important enough to make you run, something dangerous enough to make him tear apart half of Italy looking for you. I need to know what it is before I risk my network protecting you. The moment of truth. Trust or die. Those were still the only options. Serafina pulled out the phone and opened the encrypted photo gallery. Hundreds of images. Every page of her father's ledger documented in careful detail. My father kept records, she said quietly. 30 years of crimes, assassinations, blackmail, corruption. Everyone he paid, everyone he owned, everyone he destroyed. Lucien's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition or calculation. Maybe both. Show me. She handed him the phone. He scrolled through images in silence, his face growing progressively harder with each page. When he reached the entry about Giovanni Moretti's assassination, he stopped. Your father ordered the hit on Caius's father. Yes. Does Moretti know? Not yet. If he finds out, he'll kill you. Lucien continued scrolling. Slowly, publicly, as a message to anyone else who might think about betraying his family. He reached the section about Elena De Luca's murder. Stopped again. Read it 3 times. Your mother, he whispered. He killed Elena. I know. Lucien's hands trembled slightly. The first crack in his composed facade. She wrote me letters. For years. Told me she was sick. Told me the cancer was aggressive. Told me she was dying. His voice broke. I believed her. I mourned her. I attended her funeral and stood beside your father while he played the grieving husband. He played everyone. And Moretti? Lucien's eyes were sharp now, dangerous. What's his connection to this? Serafina showed him the entries documenting Caius's payments to destroy evidence of Elena's murder, the consolidation agreements, the systematic erasure of her mother's medical records. Lucien read in silence, his expression growing colder with each revelation. Moretti knew, he said finally. He's been cleaning up your father's crimes while using them as leverage to consolidate power. He married you knowing exactly what your father did, used you to legitimize his takeover while simultaneously destroying the evidence that would justify it. Yes, that's brilliant, ruthless and brilliant. Marry the daughter to show mercy and continuity. Use the marriage to access everything, destroy the evidence, control the narrative, emerge as the righteous successor while burying the truth that started it all. Lucien looked at her with something resembling respect. And you stole the only remaining proof. I didn't steal it. I inherited it. There's a difference. Not to Moretti. Lucien handed back the phone. To him, you're a liability. A threat. A loose end that needs to be eliminated before you can expose him. Serafina's chest felt tight. Can you help me or not? Lucien was quiet for a long moment, weighing options she couldn't see, calculating risks she couldn't measure. I can get you out of Europe, he said finally, but it won't be easy. Moretti's network is extensive. He has connections in every major city, contacts in law enforcement, resources that most governments would envy. You'll need a new identity, new documentation, and you'll need to understand that once you leave, you can never come back. Not to Italy, not to this life, not to anything you recognize. I understand. Do you? Lucien's voice was sharp. Because understanding intellectually and living the reality are completely different things. You'll lose your name, your history, your mother's grave, every memory attached to this country. You'll become a ghost. Is that something you can live with? Serafina thought about the estate, about 11 months of invisible suffering, about her mother dying of manufactured illness, about her father's ledger full of corpses. I'm already a ghost, she said quietly. At least this way I'll be a living one. Lucien nodded slowly. Then we have an agreement. I'll arrange everything. New passport, new identity, transport to South America, probably Argentina or Chile, somewhere far enough away that Moretti's influence is limited. How long? 3 days, maybe 4. You'll need to stay here. Don't leave the room. Don't contact anyone. Don't do anything that creates a trail. And the ledger, the photographs? Keep them. They're your insurance policy. If anything happens to you, if you disappear, if Moretti finds you, those images go public. Make sure he knows that. Make sure he understands that your death triggers the very exposure he's been trying to prevent. It made sense. Cold, ruthless sense. Dead, she was worthless. Alive, she was a constant threat that kept Caius from acting. Mutually assured destruction, The only language men like him understood. "I'll arrange everything," Lucien said, moving toward the door. "Stay here. Stay quiet. I'll contact you when it's time to move." He left before Serafina could thank him. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. She was alone again. Alone with her thoughts and her fear and the photographs that made her simultaneously the most powerful and most vulnerable person in Italy. The first day passed in suffocating silence. Serafina rationed the food she'd brought, bread, cheese, water, and tried not to think about what was happening outside the hotel room. Was Caius still searching? Had his men traced her to Como? Was Lucien actually helping, or was this elaborate theater before he turned her over for the reward money? Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, but paranoia was a poison that would drive her insane if she let it. She compromised by staying vigilant without surrendering to panic. The second day, she made a mistake. Boredom and isolation created a dangerous combination. The television in the room worked, and against every instinct screaming at her to stay invisible, Serafina turned it on. The news was full of the usual disasters: political scandals, economic crises, sports scores. Then, buried in the business section, a brief mention. Caius Moretti, head of the Moretti financial empire, has offered a substantial reward for information regarding his missing wife, Serafina de Luca Moretti. Authorities say there is no evidence of foul play, and the family requests privacy during this difficult time. The screen showed a photo of them together at some charity gala 6 months ago. Caius in a tuxedo, elegant and controlled. Serafina in a silver dress, smiling the empty smile she'd perfected over 11 months of pretending. They looked like the perfect couple, the perfect lie. She turned off the television, her hands shaking. The knock came on the third day. Not Lucien's controlled rap. This was harder, more insistent, authoritative. Serafina froze, her heart hammering, her mind racing through possibilities. Lucien had said 3 to 4 days. It had only been 3. Maybe he was early. Maybe something had changed. Or maybe she'd been found. Anna Marini? A man's voice. Official, cold. "Polizia, we need to speak with you." "Police." Serafina's blood turned to ice. She moved to the window, looked down at the street below. 2 police cars. 4 officers visible, more likely waiting out of sight. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Don't open the door. Fire escape. Roof. Go now. No signature, no explanation. Trust or die." She grabbed her bag, shoved the phone into her pocket, and ran for the bathroom window. It opened onto a narrow fire escape, rusted metal that groaned under her weight. Below, the alley was empty. Above, the roof was 3 floors up. Behind her, fists pounded on the hotel room door. "Signora Marini, open the door immediately." Serafina climbed. The metal was slick from morning dew. Her hand slipped twice. Her legs burned. Fear gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. She hauled herself onto the roof just as she heard the hotel room door splinter open below. The roof was a maze of vents and satellite dishes and crumbling chimneys. Como spread out around her, terracotta tiles and church spires and the lake glittering in the distance like broken glass. Another text. "Northwest corner. Blue sedan. Get in." She ran across the roof, jumping gaps between buildings, ignoring the screaming in her lungs and the terror clawing at her throat. The northwest corner ended in a 3-foot gap leading to the adjacent building. Serafina didn't hesitate. She jumped, made it across by inches, kept running, down a different fire escape, through a different alley, out onto a side street where a blue sedan idled with its engine running. She yanked open the door and threw herself inside. "Drive!" The driver didn't need to be told twice. They peeled away from the curb just as police officers rounded the corner behind them, shouting, radios crackling. Serafina looked at the driver. Not Lucien. A younger man, maybe 30. Dark hair. Expensive watch. The kind of calm that came from being very good at very dangerous things. "Who are you?" "Someone trying to keep you alive." His accent was Italian but educated. Refined. "Lucien sent me. The police were tipped off about your location. Someone sold you out." "Who?" "We don't know yet, but Moretti's people are everywhere. You're not safe in Como, not safe in Italy. We need to move you immediately." They drove for 20 minutes through increasingly rural roads, heading away from the city, away from the lake, toward the mountains. Finally, they pulled into an old warehouse on the outskirts of a town Serafina didn't recognize. Lucien was waiting inside, but he wasn't alone. Standing beside him, arms crossed, expression unreadable, was a woman Serafina recognized from her father's funeral. Isabella Moretti, Caius's younger sister. Serafina's hand moved instinctively toward her knife. "Don't," Lucien said quietly. "She's here to help." "Help?" Serafina's voice was raw. "She's a Moretti. She's probably the one who tipped off the police." Isabella stepped forward. She was 30, beautiful in the same cold way Caius was handsome, with dark eyes that missed nothing and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. "If I wanted you caught," Isabella said, her voice cutting, "you'd already be zip-tied in the back of one of my brother's cars. Sit down. We need to talk." "I'm not sitting down with you?" "Then stand. I don't care. But you're going to listen because your life depends on understanding what's actually happening." Serafina looked at Lucien. "What is this?" "A negotiation," he said. "Sit, please." She sat, not because she trusted them, but because standing required energy she no longer had. Isabella pulled up a chair, sitting close enough that Serafina could see the tiny scar above her left eyebrow, the same scar Caius had. Family trait. Family violence. Family secrets. "You think you're running from my brother," Isabella said. "But you're wrong. You're running from something much bigger, something you don't understand yet." "Then explain it." Isabella glanced at Lucien, who nodded. "My father didn't die in a car accident," Isabella said. "I mean, he did, but it wasn't an accident. Your father ordered the hit. You know that already. It's in his ledger. What you don't know is that Caius knew about it 3 months before your wedding." Serafina's stomach dropped. "What? Your father made a mistake? He kept records, but he also bragged. Got drunk one night, told the wrong person. That person told another person. Eventually, word reached my brother." Isabella's voice was clinical, cold. "Caius spent 6 months planning his revenge. He was going to kill your father, slowly. Make him suffer for what he'd done to our family." "Then why didn't he?" "Because your father died first. Suicide. Or at least that's what the official report said." Isabella leaned forward. "But here's what you need to understand. Your father didn't kill himself. Someone else did. Someone who wanted to prevent the war that would have erupted if Caius had gotten his hands on him." The room tilted. Serafina gripped the edge of the chair, trying to process information that was rewriting everything she thought she knew. "Who killed him?" Isabella's smile was blade thin. "I did." The words landed like bullets. I killed your father. Put a gun in his hand. Made it look like suicide. Saved my brother from starting a war he couldn't win, and saved your family from total annihilation." Isabella's voice was matter-of-fact. "You're welcome, by the way." Serafina couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't reconcile the elegant woman sitting across from her with the confession she'd just heard. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to understand the game you're playing. You think this is about love or marriage or escaping an abusive relationship. It's not. It's about power, territory, revenge that spans generations." Isabella stood, pacing like a predator in a cage. "Caius married you because he's still planning revenge. Not against your father. You can't kill a dead man. Against your father's legacy. Against everything your family built. Against you." "I don't understand." "He's systematically destroying your family's empire, taking over territories, absorbing businesses, erasing the De Luca name from every corner of the Italian underworld. By the time he's finished, it will be like your family never existed. And you, the last surviving De Luca, you were supposed to be the final piece, the trophy wife who legitimized his takeover, the living symbol that the Moretti family had conquered completely." Serafina's hand shook. "Then why did he let me go? Why hasn't he dragged me back?" Isabella and Lucien exchanged a look. "That's the problem," Lucien said quietly. "He hasn't let you go. He's hunting you. And when he finds you, he won't bring you back to the estate. He'll bring you to a very different location, somewhere private, somewhere nobody will hear you scream." "You're lying." "Am I?" Isabella pulled out her phone, opened a file, and showed it to Serafina. The screen displayed a document, a contract, dated 4 months ago. The header read, Asset Elimination Protocol, S. DeLuca. Below it, detailed instructions for Serafina's disappearance. Methods. Timeline. Disposal procedures. All signed by Caius Moretti. The document was dated 2 months before their anniversary, before Serafina found the ledger, before she ran. He'd been planning to kill her all along. The marriage had never been about consolidation or legitimacy. It was an execution with a waiting period. No. Serafina's voice was barely a whisper. No, this is fake. You're trying to manipulate me. Why would we? Isabella's voice was sharp. What do I gain from lying? You already hate my brother. You're already running. The truth doesn't change your situation. It just explains it. Then why tell me? Why help me? Because my brother has become a monster. Isabella's mask cracked slightly, showing something raw beneath. He wasn't always like this. Our father's death broke something inside him, made him cold, made him ruthless, made him forget that we're supposed to be better than the people we destroy. She paused, her voice dropping. I killed your father to prevent a war, but I can't kill my brother, so instead, I'm giving you a choice. What choice? Isabella sat down again, leaning close, her eyes boring into Serafina's with an intensity that was almost physical. Option 1. Keep running. We'll help you. New identity, new continent, new life. You disappear forever. Caius eventually gives up searching. You live, but you live knowing he won, knowing he erased your family, knowing you abandoned everything your mother and your grandmother and every DeLuca woman before you fought to protect. Or, option 2. You fight back. You use the ledger. You destroy him the same way he's been planning to destroy you. You become what he fears most, not a victim, but an opponent. Serafina's laugh was bitter, hollow. I'm not a fighter. I'm a 23-year-old woman who spent 11 months being invisible. I don't know how to fight men like Caius. Then you learn. Isabella's voice was steel. You learn quickly. You learn ruthlessly. You become someone he didn't plan for, someone he can't predict, someone dangerous. And if I fail, then you die. But at least you die fighting instead of spending the rest of your life running. The warehouse was silent except for the sound of Serafina's ragged breathing and the distant hum of traffic. 2 choices. Neither good, both lethal in different ways. Why do you care? Serafina whispered. Why does any of this matter to you? Isabella's expression softened slightly. For the first time, she looked almost human, because my brother used to be good, before our father died, before revenge consumed him, before he turned into the kind of man who could plan his wife's murder with the same clinical detachment he uses to order coffee. Her voice cracked. I want my brother back, and the only way to save him is to destroy the monster he's become. You're the only person with the leverage to do it. You want me to destroy him to save him? I want you to break him so completely that he has no choice but to rebuild himself into someone better, someone human, someone who remembers what it feels like to lose instead of always winning. The logic was twisted, cruel, desperate, also possibly the only truth Serafina had heard in days. Lucian spoke for the first time in minutes. Whatever you decide, you need to decide now. The police are still searching. Caius's men are closing in. Every hour you wait is another hour they get closer. Serafina closed her eyes. She thought about her mother wasting away in a hospital bed. She thought about her father's ledger full of corpses. She thought about Caius delivering the news of their loveless marriage over breakfast espresso. She thought about the elimination protocol with her name on it. She thought about 11 months of being invisible, being used, being nothing. And she thought about the woman she'd been becoming in the 3 days since she ran. Someone harder, colder, infinitely more dangerous than the frightened girl who'd married into the Moretti family. When she opened her eyes, something had changed. Something fundamental. Something irreversible. If I do this, she said slowly, her voice steady for the first time since entering the warehouse, I need to know everything. Every secret, every weakness, every piece of leverage that can be used against him. Isabella smiled. It was a terrible smile. Beautiful and brutal and full of the same darkness that lived in her brother. Then welcome to the war, Serafina de Luca. Let me teach you how to kill a king. Outside, Como continued its ordinary existence. Tourists taking photos, boats crossing the lake, the world spinning forward in oblivious normalcy. Inside the warehouse, 3 people plotted the destruction of one of Italy's most powerful crime lords, and Serafina finally understood the truth her mother had tried to teach her through 11 months of silent letters. Survival wasn't about staying small. It was about becoming the monster before the monster devoured you whole. The choice was made. The point of no return was crossed. Now came the hardest part, learning to hunt the man who'd been hunting her all along. Isabella Moretti didn't waste time with sentiment or strategy sessions. Within 2 hours of Serafina's decision, they were moving. The warehouse emptied quickly. Lucien disappeared to arrange documentation and safe houses. The young driver who'd rescued Serafina from the hotel, his name was Marco, and he worked for Isabella's private security team, left to establish surveillance on Caius's movements. That left Serafina alone with the woman who'd murdered her father and was now offering to help destroy her brother. Trust wasn't possible. Alliance was. First lesson, Isabella said, pulling out a laptop and opening encrypted files. Stop thinking like a victim. Victims react. Opponents anticipate. You need to get inside Caius's head before he gets inside yours. They sat at a scarred metal table in what had once been the warehouse's office. The space smelled like rust and old cigarettes and the particular desperation of abandoned places. Isabella pulled up surveillance footage, dozens of files showing Caius over the past 3 days, entering his office, leaving meetings, talking on phones, always controlled, always calculating. Watch his patterns, Isabella instructed. He's methodical, predictable in some ways. Every morning, 6 a.m., he runs the perimeter of the estate. No guards. Just him and whatever demons he's trying to outrun. That's vulnerability 1. You want me to kill him during a morning run? I want you to understand that even kings have routines that make them mortal. Isabella's voice was sharp. Vulnerability 2. Wednesday nights, he meets with his financial advisors at a private restaurant in Florence. Same table, same time. The route is consistent. Vulnerability 3. He trusts exactly 4 people completely. Me, Luca, his security chief, his accountant, and his lawyer. Everyone else is expendable. That isolation is both strength and weakness. Serafina studied the footage, watching Caius move through his days with the mechanical precision of someone who'd turned emotion into liability. What am I looking for? Cracks. Moments where his control slips. Places where pressure could fracture him completely. Isabella fast-forwarded through footage until she found what she was looking for. There. Watch. The video showed Caius in his study 3 nights ago, the night after Serafina disappeared. He sat at his desk surrounded by papers, and for just a moment his mask slipped. His hand trembled as he lifted a glass of whiskey. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, almost human. Then someone knocked on the door, and the mask snapped back into place. Perfect. Impenetrable. Cold. He's breaking, Isabella said quietly. You leaving destroyed something in him he didn't know he had. He's been tearing apart the country looking for you, not because you're an asset, because he can't accept that you escaped, that you chose to leave, that you had agency he didn't control. So what? I'm supposed to feel sorry for him? No, you're supposed to use it. Isabella closed the laptop. Emotional vulnerability is tactical leverage. He's desperate to find you. That desperation makes him reckless, makes him predictable, makes him weak. Serafina's jaw tightened. What's your plan? We force a confrontation, not on his terms, on yours. We make him come to you, and when he does, you give him a choice that destroys him either way. What choice? Isabella smiled that terrible smile again. Surrender the empire or lose you forever. Make him choose between power and the one thing he's realized he actually wants. The logic was cruel, elegant, precisely calculated to inflict maximum damage. And if he chooses power, then you release the ledger, destroy him publicly. Watch his empire crumble. Make sure he loses everything while knowing you were the one who took it from him. And if he chooses me, then he dismantles everything he's built, becomes nothing, proves that what he feels is real by sacrificing the only thing that ever mattered to him. Isabella leaned back in her chair. Either way, you win. Either way, he loses. That's the only justice women like us ever get, making sure the monsters who try to destroy us suffer consequences. The plan was insane. Also possibly the only thing that made sense. I need the ledger, Serafina said. The physical copy. Not just the photographs. Why? Because if this goes wrong, if he kills me or captures me or breaks me, I need the original somewhere he can never find it. Insurance, protection, proof that my death means his destruction. Isabella nodded slowly. Lucien has it, hidden at the lake house. We can retrieve it tonight. They left the warehouse after dark, taking back roads through countryside that looked black and infinite under moonless sky. Marco drove while Isabella and Serafina sat in tense silence, both women preparing for battles they couldn't fully anticipate. The lake house was exactly where Beatrice said it would be, a small cottage that had witnessed Serafina's first real understanding of her father's crimes. Beatrice answered the door with a shotgun, lowered it when she recognized Isabella. You brought her here? Beatrice's voice was tight with fear. Are you insane? If Moretti's people track her, they won't. Isabella stepped inside without invitation. We need the ledger, now. Beatrice looked at Serafina. Are you sure about this? Once you start down this path, there's no turning back, no mercy, no second chances. There was never any mercy. Serafina's voice was steady, cold. I'm just finally accepting that. Beatrice disappeared into a back room and returned with the leather-bound ledger, handling it like it was radioactive. Your mother would be proud, she said quietly, pressing it into Serafina's hands. And terrified. Mostly terrified. My mother died terrified. I'd rather die fighting. They left before Beatrice could argue, carrying 30 years of documented evil wrapped in aged leather, driving through darkness toward a confrontation that would end with someone destroyed. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Isabella taught Serafina how to think like a predator, how to identify weakness, how to exploit fear, how to transform vulnerability into weapon. They studied Caius's patterns obsessively, his routines, his contacts, his movements, building a map of his life detailed enough to predict his reactions, anticipate his strategies, stay 3 moves ahead. Marco provided real-time intelligence. Caius had pulled dozens of men from regular operations to search for Serafina. The reward had increased to 1 million euros. Desperation was spreading through his organization like infection. He's losing control, Marco reported on the second day. His men are questioning him. Rival families are sensing weakness. The longer you stay missing, the more his authority erodes. Good. Isabella's voice was clinical. Let him bleed. Let him feel what it's like when the thing you took for granted disappears. On the third day they moved. Not to hiding, to visibility. Isabella arranged for Serafina to be seen in Milan, a carefully staged sighting at a luxury hotel, enough witnesses to ensure word reached Caius within hours. The message was deliberate. I'm not hiding anymore. Come find me. The hotel was the Grand Milano, 5-star elegance in the heart of the city, the kind of place Serafina had visited dozens of times in her old life. Now she walked through its marble lobby wearing clothes Isabella had provided. Expensive but unremarkable, designed to be noticed but not remembered. She checked in under her real name. Serafina de Luca Moretti. The clerk's eyes widened. Within 10 minutes, 6 different people had made phone calls. Within an hour, the information reached Caius. Serafina waited in her suite on the 14th floor, watching the city spread out below like a circuit board of lights and ambition, knowing he would come. Not immediately. Caius Moretti didn't rush into situations. He calculated, planned, controlled every variable before moving. But he would come. Because for 11 months, she'd been the one thing he couldn't fully control. And now she was openly challenging him by using his own name, staying in a public place, daring him to find her. Isabella and Marco were positioned in adjacent rooms, armed, ready, connected by encrypted communications. He'll bring men, Isabella warned through the earpiece Serafina wore. Probably Luca and at least 4 others. They'll try to take you quietly. No scene, no witnesses, just disappear you into a car and drive somewhere private. And when they try, you tell them you'll only speak to Caius, alone, no guards, No weapons. Just the two of you. Make it non-negotiable. Make him choose between his security and his pride. What if he refuses? He won't. His ego won't let him. You're his wife, his property, his failure. He needs to face you himself, needs to understand how you escaped, needs to prove he's still in control. Isabella paused. Men like my brother can't resist the chance to demonstrate dominance. Use that. The knock came at 11:47 p.m. Sharp, controlled, authoritative. Serafina opened the door. Lucas stood in the hallway with three other men, all broad-shouldered and dead-eyed in the way of professional killers who'd stopped counting bodies years ago. Signora Moretti. Luca's voice was respectful. Final. Please come with us. Your husband is very worried. Where is he? Waiting. We'll take you to him. Then bring him here. Luca's expression didn't change. That's not how this works. It is now. Serafina kept her voice level despite the terror clawing at her throat. I'll speak to Caius. Alone. In this room. Tell him if he wants answers, if he wants to understand why I left. If he wants anything other than a very public scene that will be all over the news by morning, he comes here, by himself. No guards, no threats. Just him and me. He won't agree to that. Then we have nothing to discuss. Serafina moved to close the door. Luca's hand shot out, stopping it. You're making a mistake. I've made plenty. One more won't hurt. She met his eyes without flinching. Tell Caius I'm in room 1407. He has 1 hour. After that, I disappear again. Permanently. She closed the door in Luca's face and immediately started shaking. Isabella's voice came through the earpiece. That was perfect. Absolutely perfect. Now we wait. Waiting was torture. Serafina paced the suite, her heart hammering, her mind racing through every possible outcome. He could refuse. Could send his men to take her by force. Could decide she wasn't worth the risk. Or he could come. 37 minutes later, the knock came again. Different this time. Slower, heavier, personal. Serafina checked the peephole. Chaos stood alone in the hallway, wearing the same tailored suit he'd worn at breakfast 11 months ago when he delivered his casual cruelty over espresso. His face was different, though. Harder, more exhausted. The mask was still there, but cracking around the edges. She opened the door. They stared at each other across the threshold. Two people who'd shared a bed for nearly a year without ever truly touching, now facing each other as enemies instead of strangers. You came alone, Serafina said. You asked me to. Since when do you do what I ask? Something flickered across Caius's face. Pain, maybe, or recognition of the truth embedded in the question. Can I come in? Serafina stepped aside. He entered the suite with the controlled grace of a predator in unfamiliar territory, his eyes scanning the room with professional efficiency, checking for threats, exits, surveillance. We're alone, Serafina said. No guards hidden in closets, no ambush, just us. Caius moved to the window, looking out at Milan spreading below like burning stars. You've been gone for 6 days. Do you have any idea what the past 6 days have been like? Peaceful, terrifying, liberating, all of it better than the 11 months before. He flinched, actually flinched. I deserve that, he said quietly. You deserve a lot more than words, Caius. He turned from the window, and for the first time since she'd known him, Serafina saw something raw in his expression, something unguarded, something that looked almost like grief. Why did you run? The question hung between them like smoke. Serafina could have lied, could have deflected, could have kept playing the game Isabella had taught her. Instead, she chose truth. Because you told me you never loved me. Because I found evidence that my father killed yours. Because I discovered you'd been planning to kill me for months. Because I finally understood that staying meant dying, maybe not physically, but dying nonetheless. She held his gaze. I ran because survival required it. Caius went very still. What evidence? My father's ledger. 30 years of crimes documented in meticulous detail, including the €2 million payment for Giovanni Moretti's assassination 6 years ago. The blood drained from Caius's face. You found... He stopped, started again. You have proof? Photographs, Documents, dates, methods, everything. Serafina pulled out her phone, showing him images of the ledger pages. I know what my father did. I know he killed your father. I know you married me knowing that truth. I know you've been systematically destroying evidence while planning my elimination. That's not... Caius's voice broke. It's more complicated than... Is this fake? Serafina pulled up the elimination protocol Isabella had shown her. Asset Elimination Protocol, S. DeLuca, dated 4 months ago, signed by you. Is this more complicated too? Caius stared at the document. His hands trembled. The mask was gone now, shattered completely, leaving behind something wounded and lost and almost human. Where did you get that? Does it matter? Is it real? For a long moment, Caius said nothing. Just stood frozen in the middle of the hotel suite, looking like a man watching his entire world collapse. Yes, he whispered finally. It's real. The confession landed like a bullet. Serafina had expected it. Isabella had warned her. But hearing him admit it, hearing him confirm that he'd been planning her murder while they shared breakfast and slept in the same house and performed the theater of marriage, it broke something inside her she didn't know was still intact. Why? Her voice cracked. Why marry me if you were just going to kill me? Because I needed legitimacy. Needed your family's territories. Needed the consolidation your name provided. Caius's voice was hollow. The plan was always temporary. Marry you. Absorb the empire. Wait until the integration was complete. Then arrange an accident, a tragedy. The grieving widower consolidating his late wife's legacy while inheriting everything. How long? What? How long was I supposed to last? How long before the accident? Caius closed his eyes. 18 months. That was the timeline. 18 months and then I'd be dead and you'd be untouchable. Yes. The room was silent except for the sound of Milan humming 14 floors below and 2 people breathing in the wreckage of revealed truth. But something changed, Serafina said quietly. Didn't it? Caius opened his eyes. They were red-rimmed, exhausted, devastated. Everything changed. You changed everything. I didn't do anything. I was invisible for 11 months. Exactly. His voice was raw, broken. You were patient, kind, endlessly forgiving. You loved me for 11 months while I systematically destroyed every ounce of that love through calculated cruelty. And somewhere in that darkness, somewhere between your quiet mornings and your desperate hope and your refusal to hate me, even when I gave you every reason, I fell in love with you. Serafina laughed. The sound was bitter, hollow, nothing like joy. You fell in love with me while planning my murder? That's your defense? It's not a defense. It's the truth. I loved you and I hated myself for it. Loved you and couldn't stop the machinery I'd already set in motion. Loved you and was too fucking damaged to know what to do with the feeling except bury it deeper and hurt you more. Caius moved toward her, his hands reaching out then falling to his sides when she stepped back. When you left, when I found your ring and those letters, all those letters you wrote me and never sent, I realized what I'd done, what I'd destroyed, who I'd become. And the elimination protocol? Canceled. The morning after you left, I canceled everything, called off the search for evidence, stopped the systematic destruction of your father's crimes, ended the 18-month timeline. His voice dropped to a whisper. I just wanted you back. Safe. Alive. Even if you hated me. Even if you could never forgive me. I just needed you alive. Serafina wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe the desperation in his voice was real, that the grief in his eyes was genuine, that the man standing before her was capable of transformation. But Isabella's words echoed in her mind. Emotional vulnerability is tactical leverage. Prove it, she said. What? Prove that you love me more than power, more than the empire, more than everything you've built on blood and lies and my family's corpses. Caius stared at her. How? Dismantle it, all of it. The territories, the businesses, the criminal network, everything. Serafina's voice was steel. You want me back? You want me to believe anything you're saying is real? Then walk away from the throne. Become nothing. Prove that I matter more than the power you've killed to maintain. You're asking me to destroy everything. I'm asking you to choose me or the Empire, love or legacy, the woman you claim to love or the monster you've become. The silence stretched between them like wire pulled taut. Kaya stood frozen, his face cycling through expressions too fast to name. Shock, grief, calculation, desperation, fear. And if I refuse? His voice was barely audible. Serafina pulled out the physical ledger from her bag, set it on the table between them. Then this goes public. Every page, every crime, every name. Your empire collapses. Your allies turn on you. The authorities arrest you. Rival families tear apart whatever's left. You lose everything anyway. But at least this way, you lose it knowing you chose power over the one person who actually loved you. Kaya stared at the ledger like it was a bomb. That's not a choice. That's extortion. No. Extortion is what you did to me for 11 months. This is justice. Serafina's voice was cold. Final. You have 24 hours, tomorrow night, midnight. Meet me at the Moretti Estate, the place where this started. Come alone. Bring documentation proving you've begun dismantling the empire. Transfer papers, resignation letters, evidence that you're actually choosing me over power. And if I do, if I bring proof, then we talk. Really talk. About whether love can survive what we've done to each other. About whether forgiveness is possible. About whether there's anything left worth saving. And if I don't, then you never see me again. The ledger goes public, and you spend the rest of your life in prison or dead, knowing you had a chance and chose wrong. Chaos moved toward her one final time, close enough that she could smell his cologne, that dark, expensive scent that used to make her feel small and insignificant. Now it just smelled like memory. I love you, Serafina. I know I destroyed that love. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I love you, that's real. That's the only real thing in my entire corrupted life. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so desperately it hurt. Then prove it, she whispered. 24 hours, midnight tomorrow, alone. Choose me or lose me forever. Chaos lifted his hand as if to touch her face, stopped halfway, let it fall to his side. I'll be there, he said. Then he turned and walked out of the suite, leaving Serafina standing alone with a ledger that could destroy kingdoms and a heart that had finally learned to beat without breaking. The door closed with a soft click. Isabella's voice came through the earpiece. That was perfect, absolutely perfect. Now comes the hard part. What hard part? Waiting to see if he actually shows up, if he actually chooses you, if love is strong enough to make a monster human. Isabella paused, and preparing for the very real possibility that he'll show up with an army instead of paperwork, that this was all theater, that he's planning to take you by force and make sure you never threaten him again. Serafina sank into a chair, exhaustion finally overwhelming adrenaline. What do we do if he brings an army? Then we kill them all, Isabella said matter-of-factly, and we make sure Caius Moretti understands that the woman he married is dead, that you're something else now, something harder, something he created through cruelty and will be destroyed by through consequence. The next 24 hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. Isabella and Marco prepared the estate, set up surveillance, positioned weapons, created escape routes and contingency plans for every possible outcome. Serafina spent the time reading her mother's letters to Lucian, correspondence she'd never known existed until Beatrice gave her the box. Decades of quiet desperation documented in elegant handwriting, a woman trapped by marriage and destroyed by love. The final letter was dated 1 week before her death. My dearest Lucian, I know what's happening to me. The doctors say cancer, but I can feel the difference. This isn't illness. This is murder disguised as medicine. My husband is killing me slowly, methodically, the same way he's killed everything else that threatened his control. I'm not writing to ask for rescue. It's too late for that. I'm writing to ask you to protect Serafina. She's only 16. Too young to understand how dangerous her father is. Too innocent to recognize that love is often the prettiest lie monsters tell. If something happens to me, when something happens to me, please watch over her. Don't let her make my mistakes. Don't let her confuse cruelty for protection or silence for strength. Tell her I loved her. Tell her I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to run. Tell her that survival matters more than loyalty, more than duty, more than the love we're taught to feel for people who destroy us. Tell her to choose herself. Always. Even when it breaks her. Even when it costs everything. With all my love, Elena Serafina read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face, finally understanding that she wasn't the first DeLuca woman to face this choice. She was just the first one brave enough to choose survival. Midnight approached with the inevitability of execution. Serafina stood in the same dining room where Caius had shattered her heart 11 months ago. The table was empty now. No espresso, no newspaper, no porcelain vases waiting to be destroyed, just marble and silence and the weight of history. Isabella and Marco were positioned outside, armed, ready, waiting for Serafina's signal if things went wrong. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then headlights cut through the darkness outside. A single car approaching the estate. No convoy, no guards, no army. Just one vehicle moving slowly up the drive like a funeral procession. Serafina's heart hammered as she watched through the window. The car stopped, the engine cut. The driver's door opened, and Caius Moretti stepped out carrying a leather briefcase, alone in the darkness, walking toward the estate with the slow, deliberate steps of a man approaching his own execution. He'd come, alone, just as she'd demanded. The question was whether he'd come to surrender or to destroy her one final time. Serafina's hand moved to the gun Isabella had given her, small, lethal, hidden in the folds of her dress. The front door opened. Caius walked inside. Their eyes met across the vast dining room, 2 people who destroyed each other standing in the place where it all began. "I'm here," Caius said quietly, "alone, like you asked." "And the proof?" He set the briefcase on the table, opened it. Inside, hundreds of documents, transfer papers, resignation letters, proof of dismantled operations, evidence of an empire being systematically destroyed from the inside. Serafina's hands trembled as she flipped through page after page of Caius Moretti, choosing her over everything he'd ever built. "This is..." Her voice broke. "This is real?" "It's real. I've begun dismantling the empire, piece by piece, territory by territory. It'll take months to finish, maybe years, but it's started. Irreversibly." Caius's voice was steady despite the devastation in his eyes. "You asked me to prove I love you more than power. This is the proof." Serafina looked up from the documents, looked at the man who'd planned to kill her, who'd fallen in love with her, who'd destroyed her and was now destroying himself to prove that destruction could be transformed into something else. And she finally asked the question that mattered most. "Do you actually love me, Caius? Or do you just hate losing control?" The silence between them felt infinite. Caius stepped forward, and for the first time in their entire marriage, he touched her face with gentleness instead of possession. "I don't know anymore," he whispered, his voice breaking completely. "I don't know where the love ends and the obsession begins. I don't know if I'm capable of the kind of love you deserve, or if I'm just a monster trying to possess something beautiful before it escapes. All I know is that losing you feels like dying, and I'd rather die human than live as the thing I've become." Tears streamed down Serafina's face. She pressed the gun against his chest, right over his heart, and watched his expression carefully. He didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't reach for a weapon or try to defend himself, just stood there, accepting whatever judgment she delivered. "I could kill you right now," she whispered. "End this, end you, walk away free." "I know." "Would you stop me?" "No." "Why not?" "Because you'd be right to do it. Because I destroyed the woman who loved me and created the woman who's strong enough to pull that trigger. Because maybe this is justice. Maybe this is what I deserve." Serafina's finger trembled on the trigger. 1 ounce of pressure. That's all it would take. One small movement, and Caius Moretti would die in the same dining room where he'd killed her hope 11 months ago. Poetic. Just. Inevitable. Her finger tightened, and somewhere in the darkness outside, glass shattered, and automatic gunfire erupted like thunder splitting the night, and Serafina realized with devastating clarity that neither of them had ever been in control of this story. They'd both been pawns in a much larger game, and the real players had finally made their move. The gunfire shattered the silence like the world ending. Serafina hit the floor on instinct, the gun still pressed against Caius's chest as they fell together in a tangle of limbs and terror. Above them, the dining room windows exploded inward, glass raining down like deadly snow, marble columns pocking with bullet impacts that sent chips of stone flying. Caius rolled on top of her, shielding her body with his own as automatic weapons tore through the estate with mechanical precision. "Stay down!" he shouted over the chaos. Then Isabella's voice cut through the earpiece Serafina still wore, sharp and urgent and laced with something that sounded like betrayal. "It's Luca! He brought an entire team! They're breaching from the east wing!" Caius's head snapped up, his expression transforming from vulnerable to lethal in the space between heartbeats. The mask he'd removed minutes ago slammed back into place, cold, calculating, absolutely furious. "Luca," he breathed, the name carrying the weight of a curse. More gunfire. Closer now. The sound of boots on marble. Voices shouting coordinates in clipped professional tones that belonged to soldiers, not criminals. Serafina's mind raced. "Your security chief is attacking you?" "He's not attacking me." Caius pulled her behind the overturned dining table, using it as cover while reaching for a weapon she didn't know he'd been carrying. "He's attacking us. This was never about finding you. It was about eliminating both of us." The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. Luca had been with the Moretti family for 20 years, long enough to know every secret, long enough to build his own network, long enough to wait for the perfect moment when both Caius and his problematic wife were vulnerable and isolated, a coup disguised as a rescue operation. "How many men does he have?" Serafina's voice was surprisingly steady despite the terror flooding her veins. "Enough to kill us both if we don't move. Now." They ran. Through the dining room, down the corridor Serafina had walked 11 months ago as a bride, past rooms filled with expensive furniture and family history, and the ghosts of women who died in this house before her. Isabella and Marco materialized from a side entrance, both armed, both bleeding from shallow wounds that suggested they'd already engaged Luca's forces. "Kitchen exit," Isabella snapped. "We have maybe 90 seconds before they surround the entire estate." They crashed through the kitchen, all stainless steel and unused appliances because Caius Moretti had never cooked a meal in his life, and out through the service entrance that had witnessed Serafina's escape 6 days ago. This time, she wasn't running alone. The estate grounds erupted in chaos. Men in tactical gear swarmed like ants, their movements coordinated and professional in a way that suggested military training. These weren't street thugs or low-level enforcers. These were specialists. "How long has Luca been planning this?" Caius fired twice, dropping a man moving toward their position. His face was calm, focused. This was the version of him Serafina had only glimpsed, the killer underneath the tailored suits, the monster his father had created through decades of violence. "Months, probably." Isabella reloaded with practiced efficiency. "He saw you falling apart over Serafina, saw the empire fracturing, saw opportunity. Men like Luca don't need ideological reasons to betray. They just need an opening." They made it to the tree line before the real assault began. Luca's voice boomed across the grounds, amplified by speakers, carrying the calm authority of someone who'd already won. "Caius! Serafina! There's nowhere to run. The estate is surrounded. Your people are dead or captured. Surrender, and I'll make this quick. Keep running, and I'll make it hurt." Caius pulled Serafina behind a stone wall that had been there since the property was built 2 centuries ago. His breathing was controlled, his hands steady. "He's bluffing," he said quietly. "If the estate was fully surrounded, he wouldn't be talking. He'd be executing." "Then what's his play?" "Drive us toward the north perimeter. There's a ravine there. Difficult terrain. Easy to bottle us up and finish this quietly." Caius looked at Isabella. "The tunnels. Are they still accessible?" Isabella nodded. "If they haven't found them yet. Big if." "What tunnels?" Serafina's hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally overwhelming shock. "My father built escape routes during the 80s when rival families were attempting hostile takeovers." Caius was already moving, pulling Serafina along. "Tunnels connecting the estate to the old wine cellar half a kilometer away. If we can reach the entrance before Luca's men—" An explosion cut him off. The east wing of the estate erupted in flames and smoke, the shockwave knocking them off their feet. Serafina's ears rang, Her vision blurred. Someone was screaming, but the sound was distant and distorted. Strong hands pulled her upright. Caius. His mouth was moving, but she couldn't hear the words over the ringing in her skull. Then her hearing returned in a rush of terrible clarity. "Have to move now!" They ran through smoke and chaos, through gardens Serafina had wandered during her 11 months of captivity, past the fountain where she'd sat alone wondering if anyone would notice if she disappeared. The tunnel entrance was hidden beneath a false floor in the gardener's shed. Marco reached it first, hauling open the trapdoor to reveal stone steps descending into darkness. "Go!" Isabella shoved Serafina toward the opening. "Don't stop. Don't look back. We'll hold them as long as possible." "You're not coming?" "Someone has to collapse the entrance after you're clear. Someone has to make sure Luca's men don't follow." Isabella's smile was terrible and beautiful and absolutely final. "I told you I'd help you destroy my brother. Turns out the best way to save him is to make sure you both survive. Isabella, go." Serafina descended into darkness with Caius right behind her. Above, gunfire intensified. She heard Marco shouting coordinates, heard Isabella's weapon firing in controlled bursts, then an explosion that shook the tunnel walls and brought dust raining down like the world collapsing. The entrance sealed with a grinding crash of stone on stone. Silence. Absolute. Suffocating. Serafina's breath came in ragged gasps. Caius found her hand in the darkness, his grip tight enough to hurt. "Keep moving," he whispered. "There's emergency lighting ahead. We keep moving or we die here." They stumbled through blackness that pressed against them like water, following a tunnel that smelled of earth and old wine and the particular desperation of people who'd fled this way before. Emergency lights flickered to life, weak yellow bulbs that had been installed decades ago and maintained through sheer paranoid necessity. The tunnel stretched ahead, carved through rock and reinforced with timber that looked older than either of them. "How far?" Serafina's voice echoed strangely. 800 meters, give or take." Caius was breathing hard now, the mask slipping again, showing the exhaustion underneath. "The wine cellar connects to an old road. From there what? We run forever? We keep hiding while Luca takes over your empire and hunts us across continents." "I don't know." The admission seemed to cost him something. "I don't have a plan beyond surviving the next 10 minutes. They reached the halfway point when they heard it, voices behind them, distant but unmistakable. Luca's men had found the tunnel entrance, had cleared the collapsed debris. "We're following." "They're faster than us," Serafina said. "They're not injured, not exhausted. They'll catch us before we reach the cellar." Caius stopped walking, turned to face her in the weak yellow light. "Then we stop running." "What?" "They expect us to run, to keep fleeing until they corner us. We give them what they don't expect." He pulled out his weapon, checked the ammunition with practiced efficiency. "We fight. There are dozens of them and 2 of us." "Yes, but we have something they don't." "What's that?" Caius's smile was blade thin, absolutely lethal. "Nothing left to lose." They found a choke point where the tunnel narrowed, where timber supports created natural cover. Caius positioned them strategically, him on one side, Serafina on the other, creating a killing field that any approaching force would have to navigate. "Have you ever fired a gun in combat?" he asked, handing her a second weapon from his ankle holster. "No. Aim center mass. Squeeze, don't pull. If it moves toward you, shoot it until it stops moving." The instructions were clinical, brutal, delivered by someone who'd given this speech before. Serafina's hands trembled as she gripped the weapon. 6 days ago, she'd been running from this man. Now she was fighting beside him against common enemies in a tunnel beneath the estate where her marriage had slowly killed everything soft inside her. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "Serafina," Caius said quietly, "if this goes badly, don't. I need you to know, don't you dare give me a dying confession. We're not dying here. We're surviving. That's what we do. We survive." He looked at her then with something that might have been love or grief or the terrible understanding that they'd finally become equals through shared destruction. "Yes," he whispered. "We survive." The first mercenary rounded the corner 3 minutes later. Caius dropped him with 2 shots before the man could raise his weapon. Then came the flood. 6 men. 8. Too many to count in the chaos of gunfire and screaming and the smell of cordite burning through recycled air. Serafina fired until her weapon clicked empty. Reloaded with hands that shook but didn't fumble. Fired again. The tunnel amplified every sound into a nightmare symphony of violence. Someone went down screaming. Someone else fell silently. Bodies piled in the narrow space, creating obstacles that slowed the assault but didn't stop it. A grenade rolled into their position. Caius kicked it back with a shout, diving on top of Serafina as the explosion tore through the tunnel. Stone rained down. Timber supports cracked. The ceiling groaned like something dying. "Tunnel's collapsing!" Serafina's ears were bleeding. Everything hurt. "We have to run!" They ran through smoke and falling debris, through a tunnel that was eating itself, toward light that appeared ahead like salvation or mirage. Impossible to tell which. The wine cellar entrance appeared through the chaos. They burst through into cool underground air that smelled of fermented grapes and centuries of patient waiting. Behind them, the tunnel collapsed completely. Tons of stone and earth sealing off their pursuers, burying Luca's men under the same estate that had been built on blood and violence and the broken dreams of DeLuca women. Serafina collapsed against ancient wine racks, her lungs burning, her whole body shaking with adrenaline crash. Caius sank down beside her, bleeding from a dozen shallow wounds, his expensive suit torn and filthy and completely ruined. They sat in silence, two survivors of a war neither had wanted, listening to each other breathe and trying to accept that they were still alive. "Isabella," Serafina whispered finally. "Marco, are they?" "Dead, probably." Caius's voice was hollow. "My sister sacrificed herself to save us, to save me from myself, to make sure the monster I'd become couldn't hurt anyone else." Tears streaked through the dirt on his face. Real tears. Human grief. "I'm sorry," Serafina said, and meant it. "I know she—" Don't apologize for my sister's choices. She knew what she was doing. She always knew." He wiped his eyes roughly. "She told me once that I'd destroyed every good thing in my life through obsessive control, that I'd keep destroying until someone loved me enough to stop me. I think she meant you." Serafina's chest ached. "I don't know if I love you anymore, Caius. I don't know if what we had can be called love, or if it was just trauma bonding and survival instinct. I know. I don't know if I can forgive what you did, what you plan to do. I know. I don't know if the man sitting beside me right now is real, or just another mask you're wearing until you get what you want. I know." Caius turned to look at her. His eyes were red, exhausted, absolutely honest. "I don't know those things either. I don't know what love is supposed to feel like when it's not twisted through violence and possession. I don't know if I'm capable of being the man you deserve, or if I'm just wreckage pretending at redemption." "Then what do we do? We survive this moment, then the next, then the one after that. We don't plan. We don't promise. We just exist in the immediate present and see if existing together is enough." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. They left the wine cellar as the sun rose over the Tuscan countryside, painting everything gold and red like the world was on fire or being reborn, impossible to tell which. The old road Isabella had mentioned led to a truck stop 15 kilometers away. They walked it in silence, two people covered in blood and dirt, and the evidence of their shared catastrophe, looking like refugees from a war zone, which they were. A taxi driver picked them up without asking questions, drove them to a small hotel in a town whose name Serafina didn't catch and didn't care about. They paid cash, checked in under false names, collapsed into separate beds, and slept for 16 hours straight. When Serafina woke, Caius was sitting by the window watching the street below with the vigilance of someone who'd learned that safety was temporary and enemies were everywhere. "Luca survived," he said without turning. "I've been monitoring communications. He's claiming the estate was attacked by unknown assailants, that I'm missing and presumed dead, that he's assuming temporary leadership to stabilize the organization during this crisis." "And your people believe him?" "Some do, some don't. It doesn't matter." Caius finally looked at her. "The empire is fractured. Rival families are moving into territories I can't defend. Luca has enough loyal soldiers to hold core operations, but not enough to expand. Within 6 months, Everything I built will be carved up and distributed among stronger predators. He said it without emotion, just stating facts. And you're okay with that? I'm alive. You're alive. Compared to the alternative, yes. I'm okay with that. He stood, moving to the small table where the briefcase he'd brought to their midnight meeting sat waiting. I meant what I said. The dismantling orders are real. The Empire is already dying. Luca just accelerated the timeline. Serafina sat up slowly, her body protesting every movement. What happens now? That depends on you. On me? I can disappear. Become someone else. Start over somewhere far away where the Moretti name means nothing and the past can't find me. Caius's voice was careful, cautious. Or I can stay. Fight for what's left. Try to rebuild something less poisonous from the ruins. You're asking me to choose your future? I'm asking if you want to be part of it. Either future. Any future. He moved closer, but didn't touch her. Didn't assume permission. I destroyed the woman who loved me. I know that. But maybe the woman who survived is someone I could love better. Someone I could be better for. If you'd let me try. Serafina looked at the man who'd planned her murder and then dismantled his empire to prove he loved her. The man who'd shielded her body with his own during the assault. The man who'd fought beside her in a collapsing tunnel and cried real tears for his dead sister. She didn't know if she loved him, but she recognized him, recognized the damage, the desperate desire to be more than the monster circumstance had created, the terrible hope that redemption was possible if someone just believed in it hard enough. I need time, she said finally. Time to figure out who I am without being defined by fear or survival or the weight of my family's sins. Time to understand what I actually want instead of just running from what I don't. How much time? I don't know. Months, maybe years, maybe forever. Caius absorbed this with visible pain but no argument. And us? Is there an us in any version of that future? I don't know that either. Serafina stood, wrapping the hotel blanket around herself like armor. What I know is that I'm not going back to being someone's possession. Not yours. Not anyone's. What I know is that love shouldn't feel like drowning. What I know is that if we try this, if we try being anything other than enemies or survivors or two damaged people clinging to each other, it has to be different, completely different, built on honesty instead of lies, on choice instead of obligation, on actual partnership instead of ownership. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I. But I know how to learn, know how to try, know how to demand better than what we had. She held his gaze. The question is whether you're actually capable of giving it, whether the man you're becoming can exist without power, without control, without the empire that defined you for so long. Caius was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something she'd never seen him do in 11 months of marriage. He knelt. Actually knelt on the floor of a cheap hotel room in a town neither of them knew, looking up at her with absolute surrender. Teach me, he said quietly. Teach me how to be someone worthy of you. I don't know if I'll succeed. I don't know if I'm capable of the transformation you deserve. But I'll try. Every day. Every moment. I'll try to be better than what I was. Serafina looked down at Caius Moretti, the most feared crime lord in northern Italy. The man who'd ordered executions without flinching, the monster who'd planned her murder, kneeling in surrender. And she realized something devastating. She had already won. Not by destroying him, by forcing him to destroy himself, by making him choose between power and humanity, by surviving long enough to watch the empire crumble and the monster transform into something almost human. Get up, she said softly. He stood slowly, waiting for judgment. I'm leaving today, Serafina continued, going somewhere far away, somewhere the Moretti name and the De Luca legacy can't follow. I'm taking my mother's letters and the ledger photographs and nothing else. I'm starting over completely. And me, you do the same. Different continent, different life. You finish dismantling what's left of the empire. You testify against the corruption you were part of. You turn evidence over to authorities who'll actually use it. You become someone unrecognizable to the man who married me. And then maybe, if we both survive becoming better people, if we both figure out who we are without the violence and the lies and the blood, Maybe we see if there's anything worth building between two people who finally learn to choose themselves first. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even hope. It was possibility, fragile and uncertain and absolutely honest. Caius nodded slowly. How will I find you? You won't. I'll find you. If and when I'm ready. If and when I believe you've actually changed instead of just performing change to get what you want. And if you never believe it, then you spend the rest of your life being a better man anyway. Not for me, for yourself, for the sister who died trying to save you, for all the people you hurt along the way. Serafina moved to the door, ready to walk away for the second time. That's the price of survival, Caius. You don't get certainty. You don't get guarantees. You just get the chance to try being better, and the hope that eventually better becomes who you actually are. She left before he could respond. Walked out of the hotel into morning sunlight that felt like resurrection. Cool, clean, absolutely liberating. Behind her, Caius Moretti stood alone in a hotel room surrounded by the wreckage of his empire, and finally understood what his wife had been trying to tell him for 11 months. Love was a choice, not a conquest. And he'd been choosing wrong the entire time. 6 months later, Buenos Aires. A quiet bookstore tucked between a bakery and a flower shop that sold roses and lilies and hope disguised as botany. A woman with shortened dark hair and tired, intelligent eyes arranged novels beneath warm afternoon sunlight while Spanish jazz drifted softly through the room. She wore simple clothes, no designer labels, no jewelry except a silver cross that had belonged to her mother. Nobody there knew her as Serafina de Luca. Nobody knew she'd been married to one of Italy's most powerful crime lords. Nobody knew about the ledger she'd used to destroy an empire, or the tunnel she'd fought through, or the sister who died to save her. Here, she was just Anna, a quiet woman who ran a bookstore and spoke fluent Spanish with a slight Italian accent, and occasionally smiled at customers in a way that suggested she'd learned joy was possible after surviving something terrible. The newspaper on the counter carried a headline she'd read 3 times already. Moretti Empire collapses full. Former crime lord testifies against decades of corruption. The article detailed the systematic dismantling of the Moretti criminal network. Territories absorbed by rival families or handed over to authorities. Businesses sold off or shut down. Politicians arrested. Judges removed. Decades of corruption exposed through testimony given by Caius Moretti himself, who'd negotiated immunity in exchange for complete cooperation. The final paragraph noted that Moretti had entered protective custody after testifying. His current whereabouts were unknown. Several sources suggested he'd left Italy entirely. Some rumors claimed he'd died. Others said he'd simply disappeared into the kind of ordinary existence that powerful men never chose willingly. Anna folded the newspaper carefully and set it aside. No tears, no smile. Just the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd demanded better and watched the world actually deliver. A little girl entered the bookstore asking for a novel about pirates. Anna guided her gently toward the adventure section, found the perfect book about a girl who escaped an arranged marriage to become a ship captain, and handed it over. The child grinned brightly. Is it scary? Sometimes, but the girl survives. That's what matters. She survives and becomes someone stronger than the people who tried to control her. That's a good story. Yes, Anna agreed quietly. It is. The girl left with her mother, clutching the book like treasure. Anna returned to arranging shelves, losing herself in the simple mechanics of alphabetical order and genre classification and the particular piece of a life built on honest work instead of blood and lies. The bell above the door chimed. She didn't look up immediately, just called out in Spanish, "Welcome. Let me know if you need help finding anything." "I'm looking for a book about second chances." The voice made her freeze. Slowly, Anna turned. A man stood in the doorway, mid-30s, dressed simply in jeans and a worn jacket. His hair was longer than she remembered, his face more weathered. The expensive watch was gone. The tailored suits were gone. The mask of controlled elegance was gone. What remained looked almost human. Caius Moretti stood in her bookstore in Buenos Aires, looking like someone who'd crossed an ocean and an entire transformation to find the woman who'd demanded he become better. "How did you find me?" Anna's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "I didn't. Not directly. I just kept becoming someone worthy of being found and hoped that eventually you'd see the evidence. Hoped that eventually you'd believe it was real. And you think you're worthy now? No. I think I'm better than I was. I think I've spent 6 months testifying against my own crimes. I think I've turned over evidence that's destroyed the empire I spent my life building. I think I've tried every single day to be someone your mother would have trusted with her daughter's safety. He stepped closer. Not crowding, not assuming, just close enough to be heard clearly. But worthy? That's for you to decide. Anna studied him with the careful assessment of someone who'd learned that trust was earned through actions, not words. The testimony was real. Every word. I gave them everything. Names, dates, evidence. Enough to indict 24 politicians, dismantle 3 trafficking operations, and expose corruption that reaches into parliaments across Europe. His voice was quiet. Matter of fact. My sister died trying to save me from myself. I'm trying to make that sacrifice mean something. And what do you want from me? Nothing. Everything, I don't know. Kais's hands hung at his sides, open and weaponless. I want to prove that the man kneeling in that hotel room 6 months ago wasn't performing, that the change is real, that I'm capable of being someone who chooses love over power every single day for the rest of my life. And if I send you away, if I tell you I've moved on and built a life that doesn't include you, then I go, quietly, permanently. And I keep being better anyway because you taught me that being better isn't about reward. It's about responsibility. It's about refusing to be the monster I was even when nobody's watching, especially when nobody's watching. Anna moved closer, studying his face for cracks in the performance, for evidence that this was manipulation disguised as growth. She found exhaustion instead, genuine transformation, the kind of change that came from dismantling yourself completely and rebuilding from foundations that hadn't been poisoned by violence. I can't love you the way I did before, she said quietly. That woman died. You killed her. I know. And I won't go back to Italy. Won't go back to that life. Won't be Serafina De Luca Moretti ever again. I know. I won't be owned. Won't be controlled. Won't be anything other than exactly who I choose to be. I know. Caius's eyes were wet now, red-rimmed, human. I'm not asking you to go back to anything. I'm asking if there's room in the life you've built for someone who's learning to be better, someone who's choosing to be better. Not because he expects reward, but because you taught him that better was possible. Anna looked at the man who'd been her husband, her enemy, her destruction, and her unlikely salvation all at once. She thought about her mother's letters, about choosing herself, about survival requiring more than just escape, requiring the courage to build something new from ashes. She thought about the 11 months of invisible suffering and the 6 days of desperate flight and the 6 months of hard-won peace in a bookstore half a world away. And she thought about possibility, the fragile, terrifying, absolutely honest possibility that sometimes love required dying and being reborn as people capable of choosing each other freely instead of being chained by obligation. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said finally. I don't need forgiveness. I need a chance to earn it, every day, for however long you'll let me try. And if that's forever, if I never fully trust you again, then I spend forever proving I'm trustworthy anyway, not to change your mind, just because it's who I'm choosing to be. Anna studied him for a long moment. Then she did something that felt simultaneously like surrender and victory. She reached for his hand. His fingers closed around hers, gentle this time, not possessive, asking permission, accepting whatever she offered. There's a cafe next door, she said quietly. They make good coffee. We can sit. We can talk. We can see if 2 people who destroyed each other can figure out how to build something that doesn't require destruction. Caius's smile was small, uncertain, absolutely real. I'd like that. They walked out of the bookstore together into Buenos Aires' afternoon light. 2 survivors of a war neither had wanted, learning to exist in the immediate present without promises or guarantees or anything other than the choice to try being better together. Behind them, the bookstore stood Witness, a place built on stories of escape and transformation and the particular courage required to choose yourself first before choosing anyone else. Outside, the city moved endlessly beneath golden evening light. Two people who'd learned to survive separately were now learning if they could survive together. The ending wasn't perfect, wasn't guaranteed, wasn't the fairy tale conclusion where love conquers all and wounds heal cleanly. It was honest. It was earned. It was the only ending possible for two people who'd finally learned that love wasn't about possession or control or the pretty lies monsters tell. Love was choosing to be better. Every day, every moment. Even when, especially when, nobody was forcing you. And somewhere far away across an ocean and an entire transformation, Isabella Moretti's sacrifice became something more than tragedy. It became the catalyst that turned a monster into a man and a victim into a survivor and a loveless marriage into the possibility of something real. Not because redemption was easy, but because some people, some rare, stubborn, impossibly brave people, chose to become better than the circumstances that tried to destroy them. And that choice, more than any empire or power or legacy built on blood, was the only victory that mattered, the only victory that lasted, the only victory worth having at all.